Contention 1 is the background A, lab safety and biosafety level 3 and 4 labs, which are the labs with the deadliest and most destructive pathogens, are lax right now in the status quo. The B argument is that the anthrax attack post 9/11 was perpetrated by using anthrax made in a government-run biosafety level 4 lab, which is a good indication that lab safety is an issue. C is that the worst part is there was not a change of procedure for biosafety level 3 and 4 labs. As a result, the United States federal government passed off the anthrax attacks as a fluke that they didn't need to address. Thus, the plan the United States federal government should mandate the presence of visible armed guards at each exterior lab entrance, video recording at each exterior lab entrance, and closed-circuit television system under observation in a command and control center, and active intrusion detection systems integrated with the closed-circuit television system in all biosafety level 3 or higher laboratories where synthetic biology research is performed in the United States. We put locks on doors and shit. Contention 2 is solvency. The A argument is suggestions from a number of from internal and external studies of United States labs. B is that one or more of these protections are already in place at over 70% of BSL level 3 and 4 labs in the status quo, but very few of these labs have all 4. C is the plan to be modeled internationally. The United States is the leading development of synthetic biology, and all major institutions are in the United States, which means that development follows our patterns. The argument is that this definitely creates an international spotlight. It creates a domestic pressure to increase the safety of research done elsewhere. Contention 3 is lab safety. A is that it's terrible in the quo. 1 is left to self-governance under current guidelines. Functionally, the government decides that if people have a PhD in a field, then that must mean that they don't need oversight. 2 is that this sentiment, however, is off the mark. Synthetic Biology Engineering Research Center at Berkeley has had a number of reported problems that haven't been addressed. Dr. Paul Rabineau, who's the synthetic bio and biosafety expert formerly in charge of that laboratory, says that the people working in the field are profoundly irresponsible. 3 is the biosafety level 4 labs don't mean a thing in this context. Bruce Levins, who's the anthrax guy, worked in a BSL-4 lab, and that should mean that he would have had the highest level of security surrounding him, but he still managed to get the anthrax removed without any detection. 4 is that according to a 2010 government report, labs around the country failed to secure biological agents, which compromises the CDC's ability to respond to the creation of any new pathogens, because these biosafety lab level 4s in particular are diseases with no known cure. They do not exist. That's where we keep things that we might like to weaponize in the future. 3 is that the closest thing to oversight that the federal government has is an internal U.S. Department of Agriculture policy that just says, in light of legislation as a temporary solution. This amounts to allowing lab directors to make the decisions themselves. The B is the impacts. First is bioterrorism. Without a minimum level of security, the release of biological agents is inevitable. This happened in the past. It doesn't change policy, indicating we have a 100% probabilistic impact, particularly given the interest of non-state anti-U.S. actors around the globe. It's also the most likely extinction impact that we would be able to get access to, because it attacks the human body at its very core. What's even worse is that the CDC has admitted that they would not be able to respond if the labs are secured, which means that the labs are a target and they're incredibly easy to get into. 2 is that the release of a level 4 pathogen would lead to millions of deaths. Our argument, again, you can cross-apply, is that these don't have any cure. Even if there were containment, millions or perhaps billions of people would die. BSL-4 are incurable. Without a containment system, the disease spread would go global and would kill billions or perhaps cause extinction. 3 is animal disease. Our argument is that an accelerated release of the pathogens risks a distortion of local ecosystems, which would ripple throughout the food chain, devastating the ability of each species to subsist on one another, causing constant cascades of extinction. Biosafety level 3 and 4 labs where we test cures and create diseases for all these types of things. A release would wipe out that food chain. You should evaluate this as a question of the precautionary principle, simply because we don't know which species may be the most important one. C is the plan solves. First is the plan creates a framework for lab safety. It increases the responsiveness to our potential threat as well as our deterrence. Also, more importantly, the guards that are armed are not only make it more difficult to get into labs, but they are also an essential deterrent because of the threat of violence. 2 is that the CCTV and recording systems would allow for a retroactive review of security breaches that would allow for a containment if those deterrents were to fail. 3 is that this would signal to the labs that the labs are not a viable target because of security concerns. And 4 is the perception is incredibly important for employees. The understanding is that they are being watched, that their performance is being monitored. This eliminates the cult of irresponsibility that exists in the status quo and would be resolved by oversight. Contention 4 is put your disads away. The A argument is that the era of great power wars is over. There's no impact to your disads. First, there has not been a military standoff between great powers since the end of the Second World War. The advancement of technology to the splitting of the atom, it demonstrates that states have increased their risk calculus in such a way that they would never go to war with another nuclear state because of the threat of mutually assured destruction. Even if mutually assured destruction as a real thing is a lie, the concept is so pervasive in our international framework that we would never push forward, particularly given the common strategy of is assessing value targets and value strikes, which would wipe out millions of people in population centers. 2 is that the interconnection of the economy has made the states dependent upon one another. It becomes impossible to go to conflict with each other because it would destroy that, and it is expensive and unthinkable. This has been that means that they do not want to go to conflict with one another because of economic collapse. B is that politics ain't no thing. The first is the docket is crowded right now. It's impossible to predict uniqueness on any one question. 2 is that you can only evaluate falsifiable claims at the level that they don't have a backing to their assertion that something is on the docket. You should immediately be skeptical. 3 is that political capital absolutely is not finite. Obama's repeated fights over the Affordable Care Act and those battles that played out in Congress and the legislation that came after is pretty good proof of this. 4 is that it is not a zero-sum question. The passage of the ACA still didn't take access off the agenda. In fact, the passage of the ACA forced him to bifurcate or perhaps trifurcate the agenda, indicating that we were still able to make advancements. There is not there hasn't been a single major GOP win in that time frame. Yeah, that was 4. Yeah, it doesn't matter. 5. Backlash is a lie. Congress members don't target sequential bills just because they like something that's happened in the past. Those reactions are targeted and tied to specific items and issues. 4 is that there's not a unique scenario here. Historically, Obama has been has had an unpredictable agenda, and he's been incredibly successful. He has been inconsistent with party lines, which means that he's less likely to suffer a reversal. The 5 is that there is not a There's not an indication that it's not intrinsic to the affirmative. You could still do plan and pass whatever your legislation that you say is coming in the status quo right now is. You should challenge the desirability of the F based on the implementation of that affirmative, not simply the question of whether or not it would trade off in Congress. And the last argument here is that there's not unique link offense. People in Congress could backlash against anything, which would indicate that they would already have done it, and the people that would backlash against anything are already married to party lines, which is an indication that all of your thumpers prove that there's probably not very good luck. I told you.
I liked it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3 off. Solvency case in order. And by case in order, I mean advantage 1. Yep, no problem. Is everybody ready? Or this is the affirmative wording, the belief that the myth of the scientific frontier, they pursue synthetic biology, management can't see of genetic writing from the evils of science. This cyclical logic promotes the idea of sustainable synthetic biology, which can be perfected. It's precisely the logic that justifies continuation of scientific progress in the first place. We would say rather, science is always rooted in self-referential, non-falsifiable logic used to perpetuate its own existence. Scientific theories could become solidified through the repetition and eventually become truth. Always try to solve the problem with the problem. Next argument is the links for myths of scientific progress. We say we always construct utopian goals to justify violence and genetic manipulation by saying that if we only have the capacity to securitize the biological 3 and 4, we have a great capacity to work. The next argument is masculine. Say those regulations are the securities merely disguised to ensure the continuation of the industry in the first place, so that it doesn't shut down due to insecurity. Third is gene slaughter. Third argument is gene slaughter. Would say that the determination of which genes are valuable and is determined by the market under synthetic biology. Our first argument is surveillance. Our fourth argument is surveillance. We say that by putting guards at the doors of synthetic biology literally can note sign that it is synthetic biology research through a militaristic lens. These points the impact. First argument, scientific Auschwitz, we said that your endorsement of synthetic biology about the same logic of determining which gene deserves to live and which gene deserves to die. We say that increased disposable populations based on an economic benefit or based on threat constructions of anthrax growing throughout the entirety of the world. We say it leads to no situation no value life because we just become tools in the market. The next argument is it turns case because the solution always creates further problems. We say empirics are on our side. The atomic research results in things like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which killed 100,000 people, and satellites result in things like global strike systems, which are destined to cause massive conflicts. That's cool. Also, all of your arguments about synthetic biology creating things like anthrax, the fact that you perpetuate that whatever organization through securitizing it. The third organization is you create a military society where we reduce something has value by the amount of troops we place outside of it. At least no value left, and the government is constantly surveying us, means no propensity for self-actualization in that world. Alternative. Vote negative to reject the myth of the scientific frontier. Vote negative to reject the myth of the scientific frontier. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's real simple.
I like paper.
Our solvency. The first argument is rejection in round is important. You should reject the in-round calculations of disposable genes asked by the affirmative. Next argument is ethics. We said that obviously the obvious and true nothing happens outside of surrounding sort of movements because everything in debate is just mental masturbation. It's the only question relating to a difference between stage state and link to endorse the ethics of the negative stand against scientific frontier. Third argument is permutation of necessary links separate the methodology of the PMC creates some movement. Also, the permutation includes the methods of the affirmative which links to criticism. All alternatives the capacity to solve the affirmative because it results in no more synthetic biology. We reject the myth of progress as a mechanism to solve for the affirmative. Bioweapons. Ace points to China developing biosynthetic bioweapons in the status quo in the 2006. China said it will see their new opportunity to master bioweapons so they can use them to quote-unquote clean up the United States in 2008. From 2004 to 2008, they increased 300% in their allocation of funding for bioweapon technology. The Chinese Academy of Science also issued worth the $25,000 prize for scientists who can conduct synthetic biology research that can be dual-use technology. The next argument is that we are winning this race in the status quo. The United States spent $2 billion on a stockpile of vaccines medication against the potential weapons that exist. The United States also conducted also can defect pathogens in cities before pandemics rise. We would say you heard research for a couple reasons. The first is the cost of laboratories. We have a couple words under this first of all, your affirmative cost limit because they have to have the principle to pay all these people and also implement brand new video recording system. Obviously greatly deters business from entering this market. It also deters the ability for small labs to be able to do this because they're necessarily overstretched. Our next degree is called massive barrier to entry. Obviously, grad students wouldn't be able to research your facilities because they'd be first of all scared away because you're so militaristic and scared because you have guards standing outside the door, but also because they probably won't have the capacity to research in synthetic biology. And number 4, whatever, laboratories means no capacity to do it. Internal links. I'll get you at the bottom. What is synthetic biology? Key defense and synthetic first argument response is the rapid sequencing and update of our synthetic biology system is key to updating vaccines for pandemics. Synthetic biology is key because new pathogens contain elements from much different sources, means we don't have the capacity to predict in the status quo. Next argument determines the impacts. Our first argument is bioweapons are extremely destructive. You can stand across from their own weapons, bioweapons being used. We say China's recent achievements in the status quo. If they don't, there is a high propensity they'll get stolen because they don't have security measures. They don't have the security measures of different laboratory measures, means that there is at least as high propensity, if not higher propensity, that terrorists are able to get bioweapons that cause mass pandemic in the United States. When you say would lead to United States retaliation, that would probably kill millions of people. Yes, question, quick.
Yeah, so if grad students were afraid of rent-a-cops, doesn't that mean they're probably in the wrong field if they're making stuff like anthrax?
Well, our argument is that they're smart and weak, and they're afraid. CDC. First argument, Center for Disease Control is on status quo. The first of the budget was cut $664 million, and the personnel is frozen. There's been a massive hiring freeze in the government. Actually, absolutely no capacity to hire anybody. They also have new demands. There's a new strain of it's called coronavirus, but it has nothing to do with beer. They attacked the United States from their peninsula. These places. First argument, you guys the CDC overstretched for copies. The first argument's budget. We said they have to verify that labs are updating to their standards. Means they have to have the capacity to develop new standards for regulations and also to check those regulations necessarily cost money. Next argument is personnel. You will not win this argument. They have massive freeze, but they have to have specialists and monitors to be able to go to these places to make sure that everybody's doing the closed circuit intelligence system correctly. We would say that necessarily that would trade off with the same specialists who work with the vaccine sequencing, the status quo, sequencing internally. CDC has 6 people. First argument, CDC Global Health Initiative would be the first thing to be cut because politically untended because it works with outside the United States key to monitoring outbreaks globally, things like Ebola, etc. It also predicts and develops the vaccines and viruses that they think are most likely to make it to the United States. Sequencing impacts first argument turns to affirmative because CDC has no capacity to respond to any sort of biolink, whether that happens from a synthetic biology lab or whether that happens from any other instance of something like anthrax getting out. Next argument is superbugs. Yeah, that's fine actually. Solvency. First argument he said across from the exchange experience said other countries make synthetic biology and stuff going to destroy standards. They may go for certain capacity to model international. That's not true for recoveries. First, that China wants to remain competitive. Means that if we have mass regulations, they cost more on our synthetic biology labs. No reason why China wouldn't take the opportunity to develop their synthetic biology laboratories. They also don't have big capacity for oversight because they have so many people. They're researching synthetic biology and the status quo, but also companies are solving the status quo. A lot of them are already following the 2010 White House recommendations. That's what spurred investment because they were updating all of their security measures. In 2010, they recommended that they update their security systems. The next argument is that's fine. Also. Next argument is you have no capacity to solve. If people want the bioweapons bad enough, they'll have the capacity to hide from this thing. There are video cameras at the bar where I work at, but I still find a way to take shots just in the dish room. They'll just be printed. They also have the capacity to solve. Go to the lab stage to go down to the argument about ecosystems. First argument is the ecosystems are resilient. 1,000 species go extinct every single year, and we have the capacity to do that, to regenerate. Also, when animals are diseased, they have a propensity to shield themselves from the rest of their population, which means that they just die off. It doesn't actually spread. That's not a human condition.
They what?
They do. They run away. When they're sick, they run away. That's, I don't have any time.
Okay, it's going to be the app, then it's going to be the K, then it's going to be the CDC, then it's going to be China.
Is the solvency stuff going on top, I assume?
CDC and then China. Yes?
Yes, sorry.
We're good.
First arguments are what you stand bending across arguments about how 70% of labs already do this. Probably a reason is why there's a very small link taking the dissent. This debate should be about probability. We literally put locks on door and install video cameras, which is probably a good idea. Go down to their solvency arguments. They just say that China's not going to do so because they remain competitive. They haven't made a reason as to why China would not be able to remain competitive in terms of biosynthetic development with these kinds of things. Moreover, they have highlighted in the past that this has happened, which is probably a reason as to why we continue to do so. Moreover, they conceded the argument about international spotlight, which probably increases the threat of these things from happening, which only increases the probability that China will be able to do so, which solves their entirety of the dissent. Number 2010 argument recommended already is assumed by your neatness. The next, though, that I want is that you can extend across all of our arguments about how 70% already do some of this, and suggest a good idea. Drive down to advantage one. They only say that ecosystem is resilient and have been doing so for thousands of years. They have conceded the argument that you should evaluate this on the precautionary principle, which means scientists don't have any idea what key cell species is important for the environment. Probably reasons why you should do some. Over their arguments about how people just shield themselves and animals run away is probably a reason as to why the disease spreads further and fucks up the entire environment, are all reasons as to why that would be a bad idea to happen. They have conceded the threat of this entire advantage. You can extend across all of it now, which is talking about how there's no oversight now and that it is inevitable that we will become extinct because of the pandemic that is coming. Moreover, you can extend across all of the solvency arguments talking about how it is key to have armed guards in order to deter someone from stealing it, and the retroactive and the signalings of the labs, as well as the perception about how the employee shouldn't be able to do so. The next argument that I want those contention for, all of Ben's preempts are important here because of MAD. It means that there is no chance of any of their dissents. There's no chance that the United States retaliates to a Chinese threat and China doesn't launch a strike. Moreover, probably means that their arguments of the critique are nonsense. Go to the critique now. Look, the entire logic of this is that science is rooted in bad shit. It causes the problems to happen. Our argument is that science is probably truth-based and solves problem. That is the entire reason as to why you can get vaccines that is not caused by science but replicated throughout nature, and is the ability in order to solve that. The next argument that I win, though, is that we probably have a cold no link here. We literally regulate science. Think about that. We regulate science. Probably means that there is no chance that we link this. The next argument, though, that I want is the value to life arguments are arguments that there's always value to life, that you can still enjoy things like culture as well as entertainment and sex and food. No reason whatsoever as to why you suddenly don't have value to life. The next argument, though, is that this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, that when you say that you no longer have value to life because you're rooted in the scientific mindset, it probably increases the chance that you no longer have value to life. The next argument is that even if there's not value to life in the status quo, there is a propensity for future life to have value, which probably means that you shouldn't allow us to die of a pandemic just because there is not value to life in the status quo. The next argument, though, is a turn that nuclear weapons that are developed through science, that we can only have science in order to develop these nuclear weapons, is what causes MAD.
Argument, yeah.
Yeah, this is the cross-apply here, where Ben preempts about MAD. These arguments go conceded. They say nuclear war is bad and having bombs is bad because it causes conflict. We preempted this in the PMC by saying nuclear weapons stop conflict. This argument is conceded. It is game over. There is no chance of an impact. The next, that was going to be on the permutation debate. The first argument could be to do the plan to reject the myth of the scientific frontier. This is one either the alternative cannot solve, or they can remove minor inclusion in the plan text. And a benefit here is see the political. Their refusal to engage in the traditional policy structures only makes it much more likely that the right will fall in and continue to push for scientific discovery and increase the amount of science that we rely on. The next, though, is going to be a permutation of vote. Government and reject the myth of the scientific frontier. It is not severance, but rather complementary justification. That benefits that reformism in schools. The tools of the system, the agency argument is to get the levers of power, and it destroys the value of life if you no longer have the ability, because some of us, like myself, really enjoy having the ability in order to change the political structure. The next is going to be permutation vote for the plan text in the vacuum and do the alternative. Then that benefit here is representations are fluid, so there's no residual link, and juxtaposition solves all their offense. The plan can be a rallying cry, which only increases the amount of solvency, and the net benefit here is representational severance is key to coalition bullying, only in one way in which we allow for the coalitions to come together, where we can reframe our mindset. Are we able to solve for needs? The next will be a permutation of vote. Government embrace the ideology of the alternative. This is the best internally to effective resistance because the coalitions can build. Anything else there, Ben? Oh, they're militaristic.
You do love texts.
Their militaristic arguments are inevitable. They make arguments about how militaristic societies value. Our argument is the space and realism in which the individuals always try to increase their relative power and countries fight for what is best for them. Our argument is this is ingrained in political structures as well as international institutions, which means there's no way this round will be able to transition to 24. And the second argument, those is ingrained in human thought. The way that we developed through evolution was to have few resources and high competitiveness, which increase the ability for humans to have things like egoism, domination, and in-and-out distinction, which only makes this militaristic logic inevitable. They also make arguments how it turns the affirmative because there is no synthetic biology. Our argument is that only in which we have the ability to produce, manufacture, and stop things like the pandemics are we able to do so. No reason whatsoever as to why they would get access to that, and there is no reason to... Yeah, that's fine. CDC? They make arguments about the budget decrease now. That argument is fine, but our argument is that they still have discretionary spending, which would be more than enough in order to have this over. Go down to the link arguments. They make arguments how this would overstretch because they have to verify that things are happening. They literally just have to verify that the labs do something. It probably doesn't increase the amount of spending by that much, and they have conceded the argument that 70% of labs already do so. Moreover, if it's so important, probably no reason as to why that will happen. They make arguments how a leak from the lab is probably devastating. Our arguments are going to be that this is a problem now. They have conceded that these labs are unsafe in the status quo. Only a try or die situation. There's not a counterplan in this debate. It's game over. There's try or die in order to increase lab safety. The affirmative is the only thing that effectively does that. On China bioweapons. First argument is
WHO would also solve your terminal.
Oh, sure. And WHO, which is an international organization, the World Health Organization, has more than enough influence in order to regulate and determine whether or not the labs have the capability to infiltrate the systems. They can check whether or not there are locks on the door. China? First argument is that I want you to cross-apply all of the preempts coming out. Probably a reason as to why there's no reason as to why terrorists or China or the United States would retaliate. The next argument, though, is that they're actually moving away from bioweapons in the status quo. The first reason is because of economic decline in terms of the global recession, as well as the housing market bubble has caused them to decrease the amount of military spending. And in terms of military, they're actually increasing their submarine modernization because they want a blue water navy so they can help provide for the global good of the global international community in order to increase their capability in the United Nations. For all reasons why it's not coming in the status quo. They make a link turn here that hurts research because the cost of the labs. Look, think about this logically. The grad students are not just scared of guys that are guarding the doors. This argument is laughable. There is no reason to assume that just because you post guards on the door that grad students are not going to go there. Moreover, it is in their field. Probably a reason as to why it's happened. The next is a turn that it actually makes them feel more safe. That is why we live in America and have military bases all over the places, because we know that no one would ever attack us, and probably a reason as to why we go to the labs. The next, though, is it actually increases business confidence because it makes it look like a safe investment. This is a risk calculus here. The labs now are unsafe, which increases the ability for business to have to pay pay up, or academic institutions, we decrease that risk, which means that there's no longer a greater payout. Probably a reason as to why it would happen. They make arguments about bioweapons are bad, that's fine. Our argument is that nuclear threats still apply, which probably means that MAD still checks us back. No reason whatsoever as to why it would happen, and there is no chance that they get them stolen. They have had bioweapons in a multitude of different countries outside of Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's inevitable. Either one of two things is true. Either it's impossible to steal and deploy them, or it is inevitable in the status quo, which is probably reasons why you should still prefer the safety labs, because their only chance in order coming back from that. The only other argument here is this U.S. retaliation. I think that the preamps are more than enough. Look, at the end of this debate, I want it to be about probability. The probability that the 70% of the labs have already influenced this probably means there's no CDC overstretch.
On the CDC dissent, the WHO impact defense is distinct from our CDC impact because their argument is about worldwide health problems.
Sure, and their argument is about worldwide health program, which distinguishes the WHO argument from the CDC argument.
All right, there, I will go in reverse order, I guess. It will be the dissent 2.
That's CDC.
The CDC, or no, actually it's going to be the bioweapons one, and then the CDC. There will then be an overview. I will then go down the K in order, and then I will go to these ones. So let's see on the top. Ready? I set it for 8. I set it for 7 minutes. Sorry. All right, ready? Send the MG number 8 orcs last argument makes puts them in double by takes out the entirety of their app. They said that it's getting stolen is never from other weapons. All of their impacts on their app is predicated off of the United States the laboratories being unsafe in the status quo. People stealing that they made otherwise stealing is going to be inevitable. Is going to be inevitable because they get from other places means all your impacts about triggering extinction because disease spread is never probably a just read impact defense trap. Also CDC and we're not going for extended WHO argument solves in your offense. You also don't have any offense. Also, other 70% of other labs. So just that there's only a 30% risk of your affirmative actually doing anything, which is extremely unlikely that would trigger. Overview. You are right on the analysis of probability. That is what will determine this debate. Our criticism massively outweighs the term of impact probability. You have conceded that the planned results, actually didn't concede, you said that the planned results are massive amounts of military personnel distributed across every single scientific lab that results in the rest of the United States. You've also conceded another internal link module that is horrible for society because it creates a militarized structural society, turns the entirety of the app because because such a structured society, creates no value to life, which obviously outweighs your terms of probability of the threat of a superbug, but also makes it even more likely that your mad checks arguments are probably just self-referential things that we go into the labs for safety is probably just an argument for reason why none of your it's just the scare tactics that we talk about, right? That's in itself what creates no value to life because we always have to hide in these shelters of safety. We never actually get to do anything because we're in a militarized society. Go to the line. Extend the thesis on a couple damning information. First, if you can see that the science is self-referential means you don't actually be able to solve anything. The only thing you say here is that science is true and we're going to be able to solve problems. You'll get a reward of why this is true. All science is rooted in self-referential data in which it refers to a previous study, to a previous study, to a previous study, and says that it fixes it. You can see that the thesis of this is rooted in myth. Progress of science doesn't actually do anything. Means probably your attempts to securitize as a false utopia. Next, you go to the link debate. You can said that first of all you should reject the myth. The scientific progress. This is a framing issue because all their justifications of reasons why we need to secure these things is because science is bad because there's deadly diseases that are in there that is precisely our argument. You can see an alternative solvency that gives you can see the alternative solves the entirety of the app, which gives us uniqueness for this argument because you can see the last solvency argument that said that the ethic of the alternative would result in no laboratories being out there, which means there would be no reason for an attack because we would just get rid of all the laboratories, no reason for guards. You could also get this unique offense for our impacts. There's no reason for a militarized society to have to be produced in a world in which there's not actually any more synthetic laboratories. And actually, we'll go pretty hard for this surveillance link as the fourth one. You can see this. Obviously, the plan links result in massive, not just surveillance. Next, it has value to like to go to the impacts. First of all, you said the first impact that you've conceded that your proposition of premium guards just allows for the continuation of synthetic biology. You conceded that this just recreates the myth of Auschwitz scientific project in which these labs can determine who lives and who depending on genetic manipulation. That is conceded. That you also conceded that means no valuable life in the world of the status quo. You also conceded that turns case because it probably means that accidents are inherently more likely in which we always can believe in a world of future scientific projects. We can develop new things that probably just leads to more mutations. Those inevitably spell. Also, also you can see the militarization of society argument means that there's no value life. The arguments that you make is that there's always value life. You still enjoy things like sex, food, and arguments. Our argument is not true, right? You know, like, if your arguments are true that people are scared of security guards, then our arguments are true that you don't enjoy other things because there's a security guard literally staring at you while you're eating food, having sex, or doing whatever else Brent likes to do. Our argument, you can see the framing issue, that's bad. Yeah.
And preferring science over people.
Oh, yeah. And preferring science over people links even harder because that means that makes people disposable. You can see that next. You make an argument that it's self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say no value life, that means there is no value life. Our argument is that material things are real. There are cops with guns that walk around. That's probably not a good thing. You also, there's not a reason why this is true. Next, you say there's always a future life in which we can always have value life. For our argument is that's precisely the logic that you've conceded, that there's always this myth, the frontier, that we can always try to. There's always another day in which there will be value life, which justifies having no value life in the status quo. In a world of your understanding the world of reason, why it's try or die, because we're the ones controlling impact, uniqueness of not having value life in the status quo. Next, you make an argument that says that science is key to nuclear weapons. You concede empirics are on our side. Yes, the United States built nuclear weapons. Guess what happened? We bombed Hiroshima and we bombed Nagasaki. That is 250,000 people that died, millions of people that have resulted from radiation, cancer. In your name of science being a good thing, obviously you just say that leads to there haven't been any other war since then. I don't know. Look, the Cold War was certainly hot for places like Korea, Vietnam, a lot of places in Africa, right, Kosovo. Like, these were not Cold Wars. There was lots of people that were dying because MAD meant that there was no great power wars. So then we just hired PMCs to have proxy wars and hired nations to have proxy wars. There was more people killed from conventional wars in the 20th century than all wars combined via these proxy wars, which means your justification of MAD solves everything, which results in more further wars that get pushed to the periphery. And also, nukes are bad. Like, they ended up killing people. You don't answer that part. Yeah. Go to the alt. What's up?
What about these realism inevitable parts?
Oh, yeah. That's on the...
Okay.
I'm getting there. Alternative, extend the alternative to vote negative, to reject the myth of scientific frontier. You can see that solves the entirety of the in-ground impacts. You can see that theos is not real, which means your plan doesn't actually happen, which means it's try or die for value life in the way that you've created it. You can see that the only way that you can actually solve impacts of the round of the role of the ballot, it means that voting negative, you can actually recreate hope in a value life, which is necessary. You've also conceded that the alternative solves the entirety of the app because an ethical alternative results in not having any more synthetic biology labs, which means there's no risk of a breakout. You have no offense of why solving things like disease is good, which means you don't have any net benefit to keep labs around. You actually just have to win that. Holding people hostage with security guards is a good thing. Next, to go to the permutation. You say permutation, do the plan of regulations. You've conceded that severs the entirety of the methodology of the PMC, but also the permutation of the plan are fundamentally incompatible because we would never have security guards around. We also wouldn't have the scientific laboratories around. Next, you say to see the political argument. First of all, you concede ethics is a prerequisite. That should determine how you evaluate see the political. Also, you have given impact to this. You say they should meet more science. That just because they say more science doesn't mean you should therefore affirm the surveillance of society. Next, they say this permutation vote gov and do the alternative. That severs the entirety of the app, and there's also not benefit because this is intrinsic because it includes the entirety of the word, or because it adds the word vote app, which wasn't in the plan text, which is an independent voting issue. Also severs the entirety of the MCU. Impact turn severance and say it's key to coalitions wrong. You can vote neg, and that creates a coalition in itself because then it causes the affirmative of self-reflexive thinking, and they understand why militarism is bad. Next, or also you can extend severance as a voting issue because it's key to the end, because it's key to it makes a moving target means we can never generate offense. If you could get rid of the entirety of your app, we would never be able to win. Next, you say permutation, do the plan in the back, and you say representations are fluid. We've already you conceded that it's a voting issue. The severance is a voting issue. You can extend all the analysis here. Next, you say that permutation vote gov and include the ideology. Vote gov and include the ideology of the negative. You can extend all of the analysis of why this is just reprograding that severs the entirety of the app. Doesn't have anything.
And it just allows the government.
I gotta go. Hang on. 30 seconds.
Okay.
Next, they say militarism not because realism. That's not our ethics arguments because prerequisites. They have conceded that. Next, they also say it's biological determinism. Obviously, that is extremely bad. Next, they say that yeah, that's fine. Case debate. You can extend the impact defense here that they put on it that Outbreaks are inevitable because there's other places in the world that are secure. You didn't apply your modeling. There's different types of biological attacks. You're never going to be able to secure it. You've also conceded the thesis level that this is all a myth and none of it's real. It's just people walking around with guns.
Okay, okay. I'll do an overview on top and then I'll go down the flow. I'm sure I will reference case, but everybody ready? 3 naming mistakes by the affirmative. They have not made an argument that says the alternative links to the criticism. They have also not made an argument that says the alternative doesn't have the capacity to solve for the affirmative, and they have not made an argument that says the impacts don't happen in a world of the criticism, which means that even if they have a link differential, even if they don't link as hard as we want them to be able to link, they still obviously link more than the alternative when they concede the impacts to the criticism is going to be an easy vote for the negative in this round. Go to the thesis level now. They can see the entirety of the thesis, that there's a cyclical logic that happens when we prioritize science, when we militarize science. Look, they go for these arguments to say that some vaccines actually help us against nature, but we are responding to this within a shell. It says that things like superbugs and the things that we are fearful, the bioterrorism that we are fearful of on Advantage 1 is obviously created by humans. Yes, some death does happen through nature, but progress is the thing that spreads disease. Scientific progress and the mechanism by which the United States continues to progress and continues to advance our societies. The things like spread disease, and those vaccines that we attempt to create are also the things that become weaponized by bioterrorists or by people who steal any of this technology. Obviously, all of this technology is either created to be a weapon, which is our argument, or it's created as to solve a weapon that was also created by science that can then be transformed into a weapon again. This cyclical logic takes out the truth of the affirmative, but also is the link to our criticism. They may go for this argument about how there's always value to life. The question here is not about whether there's always value to life, it's what the state is able to justify through the mentality of the PMC. In the affirmative, the state is able to view people as disposable and less important than science, because we say that we are literally ready to militarize science in the face of people coming in and stealing. We are ready to shoot on face people who haven't had any opposition to science, or promote themselves as on a different plane than science. This justifies all the atrocities that we are talking about. It justifies a situation in which there would be no value to life because the state continues to monitor and oppress societies. Go to the second impact about turning the case. This is never answered. Our argument is that accidents continue through scientific progress. Yes, things like nuclear weapons happen. We kill hundreds of thousands of people in Japan, but also few future accidents happen. Synthetic biology is one thing that's happening right now. Who knows what's going to be in the future? What is the next bioweapon? I'm sure it's going to be developed by the United States unless you embrace the ethic of the alternative. The next argument they can go for is about how nuclear weapons are good. Our argument here is very simple. First of all, it's unfalsifiable to suggest how many lives nuclear weapons have saved. The only thing that we can actually address is how many lives nuclear weapons have destroyed. Our argument is that conventional war, as well as Hiroshima and Nagasaki, have proven that scientific progress is not benign, which is the argument that we're going for as to why it turns case. Go to the alternative now. Even if they win a parallel link term, which they have no uniqueness for, or even if they win any of their no-link arguments, and the links aren't 100%, they concede that the alternative solves the entirety of the case, which is the last argument that I make, by closing down all these laboratories. The affirmative doesn't argue that this alternative would link back into the criticism, which means it is at least net beneficial to both of the alternative in this instance. The ethic of the alternative is also net beneficial to any of the permutations. They concede an argument says that there is absolutely no fiat, which means they can't hedge their affirmative against any of the questions of the alternative. The only question is how you as a judge orient yourself to the question of scientific progress. Obviously, the permutation includes the methodology of the PMC. They can't sever out of those representations. That is in the shell. That makes them a moving target, and I suggest you vote them down if they go for any of these permutations. But furthermore, all of these permutations are coalesced around a wrong ideal. Our argument is that not that we need to create a coalition, or that we need to embrace some sort of ideology. It's that we need to make an ethical decision to reject these instances. What?
The one thing that they have is just like, if we don't use state, our argument is not that we don't use the state, it's how we use the state, and science is bad. Right.
Obviously, the alternative doesn't collapse the entirety of the state. If it does anything to impact the state, all it does is shut down synthetic biology labs and re-establish the way that we see scientific progress. No longer is it the mode of saving the world. Instead, we recognize it as what it truly is, which is a dangerous possibility that should be refused.
All right. The order, briefly, will be CDC, China, also briefly, the affirmative, actually it'll be China, CDC, the overview, then the affirmative, Then the critique.
So you switched it, so now it's China and then CDC?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
On China, you extend China's impact defense is going to be stolen inevitably, but you have conceded, but the bloc concedes the arguments that this would be modeled internationally, probably the reason why there would not be this happening. Plus, you also conceded arguments indicating that there's not a motivation to do these types of things, and it's not going to matter anyway. And on the CDC, look, let's be very clear, you are cross-applying the WHO argument of solvency, but you have conceded the distinction that we put at the bottom of the, that is that also, more importantly, you have conceded the argument that the collapse of the CDC is going to be inevitable without the plan that's lacking in the status quo, probably means that's not going to be resolved. And overview. First, you have conceded the affirmative solvency. The modeling is an indication that you would not be able to solve anything else, and is a reason why we would be able to solve this back too. Is if you don't have the specific answer to the WHO, you can cross-apply that argument. Now, our argument again is that it's inevitable that the failure of the CDC coming in the squo without a defense of the affirmative, it's going to be try or die. You don't have a counter plan. And 3, the permutation arguments you're making irrelevant there. In fact, Miranda specifically says in the LOR that if we go for these, they should be rejected. Probably a reason why is a reason to reject the team. They don't have a warrant for an independent voter. And go to the solvency argument. The only argument they make is that it's a difference question. Whatever you can extend the arguments made in the MG. Should I start? Okay, all right, there it is. Yeah, now I got it. You can extend the arguments in the MG that they're already at 70% of the labs, but there is a release and that this would be modeled internationally if it was made official policy. Those arguments conceded in the block. Probably the reason we solve the affirmative can solve an inevitable extinction scenario that's coming now. We've already opened the genie on the bottle of the myth of the scientific frontier. Probably the reason why that is the best way to resolve those issues, and you can extend the impact to the advantages that this would only cause a disease spread and that everybody is going to die. Probably means extinction is inevitable. The critique is relevant. On the critique. First, you can extend the framework arguments. He simply says that we don't have an answer to the argument that science is self-referential, but the MG is built in with arguments of scientific. Science is based on truth, and that it's good primarily because of the way that it interacts with nature. The argument is that vaccines are based on observations we make about the interaction of chemicals and biological agents in nature, which is an indication that we are referential to something that is real and in the real world. It's not simply a modeling question. This is also a reason why we get our realism arguments, because it's based on observation of human nature and the way that human beings interact with another. You can cross-apply the argument that you should only evaluate arguments that are falsifiable because of the way that these assertions manifest. We are head on that debate. The number 2 argument is again that the permutations don't matter, and even if it's true that you solve the affirmative, that is relevant because you don't solve any of the impact terms that we're going to be going for. 3 is that you don't have a good answer to value life. Your argument is simply there's no value to life if somebody's going to watch you have sex, but I would assert first that Ian is an exhibitionist, but also you just assume that everybody would be watching us all over the place. Probably not necessarily true, and it's also not an answer to the thesis of the argument that the self-center is the reason that we have value to life, because there's always something that we would be able to enjoy. It may be kind of weird if Dingus is watching me while I eat, but I'm also eating and enjoying my food. I don't know why any of your arguments outweigh. Also, I think Dingus is kind of sexy. Also, you say that the future is a myth. Your argument is the future value of life would be a myth because it's based on the type of ideology that you critique. That is nonsense. We're winning that there's always going to be value to life now, and that would be able to persist. And the impact of value to life anyway is simply that it would become extinct, which is something the affirmative would be solved. I don't think you have a particularly strong parallel internal link in terms of the fact that we have it. We have a value to life now. If it's true that the military state already exists because of the splitting of the atom, then we're all probably doing something we enjoy, indicates that there's a reason to continue to exist. And the 5 arguments, they say intrinsic severance. You can cross-apply the arguments that this is irrelevant. The permutations are simply a test of competition. You don't have a warrant why we'd be forced down in a world where we're not actually advocating them. Then there's not a reason to reject the 6 argument is that, Again, you can see that we have evidence that is based on rationale. You say it's bad. Our argument is, and your answer at the permutation level is that we should begin from a framework of ethics. Our ethic is one of utilitarianism, that it is good to save lives and people. Realism inevitably. Extend the number 13 argument that the military logic is inevitable because of the way that we've evolved human beings. We were all fighting for a relatively scarce number of resources, and we have an infinite demand for those resources, an indication that we are always going to drive to secure. In fact, our argument is that the development of nuclear weapons is a way that we can prevent those deaths. You make a lot of very compelling arguments about why conflicts still happen in the 20th century, but we will have reasons as to why that would have happened anyway, and as to why it was necessarily better than it could have been absent the development of nuclear weapons. More importantly, the advancement of science is probably going to resolve most of these questions anyway, because we could get to a point where we would not be relying on resources, and there's always a question of what the environment is trying to do to us. That is probably a problem. At the very least, that means that there's not a unique reason you would ever vote us down for putting armed guards outside of labs with CCTV. They are trying to protect a known target. Now, We are going to be going hard for nuclear weapons good because they prevent conflict. You, again, can extend the contention for arguments. Your only argument is 250,000 people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and that it was really bad, but compare that to the millions of people that are still alive as a result of the deployment of those nuclear weapons. There would be 1 million deaths alone on Japan had we gone forward with an invasion, and your arguments about the Cold War are irrelevant because you don't have any arguments indicating that those conflicts would not have happened anyway. The fact of the matter is that we are always going to secure resources where there's always going to be a conflict. The existence of nuclear weapons is what caused the great powers to not fight each other directly. It is unfortunate that proxy wars happen. I think violence is bad, but the point is that we can prevent extinction and prevent larger activations of violence as a result of that. More importantly, the creation of that is good. The great power wars almost always involve people from the global south. World War II is an example of this, means that impact is not unique.